Team USA just brought home the gold, and so does Alex Raschke. This part two of the interview is amazing. You're not going to want to miss this. So without further ado, part two, Alex Raschke.
I got a kind of an I wouldn't say off-topic question, but a little bit of a roundabout question for you, Alex. So you're balancing your W-2 right now while also being pretty much full-time in multifamily and commercial, which is amazing. I want to ask you, how do you balance those two? How do you make time for both, and how do you decide what's more important and what's not?
Yeah. This is, I feel like I'm not going to be, this might not translate to other people that are trying to work the same balance, but when I've worked at my W-2 job, I'm going on my fourth year now there. And for the first 3 years, I wasn't doing real estate at all. And I basically dedicated all of my time, anytime that there was an overtime opportunity, anytime you just needed to stay and help out a different aspect of the business, anytime there was an event, like I was always there. Um, I like to say that there was a stretch where I worked for just a month straight with averaging 85 plus hours a week, and it was a grind. I know other people have done crazier than that, but it was a rough one. But I know that the work ethic was there, and the work ethic showed through to the leadership. So I gained a lot of trust with kind of my management as well as the leadership as a whole in the business. So when it came time to slow down, it was a very seasonal business that I work at. So when it came time to slow down, I was kind of it was as if we went from 100 down to zero, and there wasn't really much for me to do. There was stuff to do, but I it just didn't fall to me. And I would always ask, like, hey, what can I do more of? Hey, what can I do? What can I help you with? And nobody really wanted to delegate anything to me, so oftentimes I would just be sitting there for 7 hours a day doing absolutely nothing. So going through all of the hours that I had put in, showing that I was there whenever they needed me, I was able to then say, hey, I'm looking to pursue this other avenue, this other path. Would you be okay if I worked from home some days? Would you be okay if I had a little bit more of a flexible schedule? Like, could we just put together project plans where I'm just required to complete these projects in a set timeline while I go do this other thing? And fortunate enough for me, they were very compliant with that. They liked the idea. They let me do it. So I would say building the relationship with management and the leadership in my company allowed me to pursue both of these at the same time and not really feel like I was just brushing them off and not doing what they're telling me to do. It was kind of a mutual understanding that if you need me, I'm here, but I'm going to be focused on real estate and this other path that I'm choosing.
That's impressive, dude. Like 85 hours a week is not easy. That is wild.
Oh.
So the work ethic definitely there. And for anybody who doesn't know Alex Raschke, and a little fun fact about him and his work ethic, he's waking up at 3, 4 in the morning to go to the gym, sometimes even going twice a day to get that lift in. Isn't that correct, Alex?
That's been the norm this last week and a half. Has been 2 a days. So, yep,
Yeah.
yep, bright and early.
Wow.
Anytime you need to get a hold of me, that's the time.
Yeah. Call him early, folks. Right as you wake up.
That's right.
Right as you're drinking that morning cup of coffee. He's already having lunch by then. But Alex, I have another question for you. A little bit more back on underwriting. I know we do a lot of underwriting together, you and I, and you talk a lot about market research and market analysis, and you talked about earlier and what's going on in even zip code specific market research. Like, why is that so important to you?
it it's so important because, like we talked about earlier, I mean, you're making the bulk majority of what you could be making at the purchase of the property. And knowing kind of the market direction will help you determine, okay, is now the time to buy, or is now the time to just gauge interest and start the conversation so that I can buy 6 months down the road when prices start to drop. So it's pivotal. You like understanding that 3 years ago were kind of the golden years to go and finance debt. Like you wanted to be getting debt at that time since interest rates were so low. And now people got into those with adjustable rates, and they were super cheap. It was super cheap to borrow money. And now those adjustable rates are kicking out of control in specific markets to the point where people are going to be hemorrhaging money and they're going to want to offload their assets. But they want to offload their assets at what prices would have been 3 years ago when money was so cheap. So that's the time when you would say, okay, this person is obviously they're hurting, but with money being as expensive as it is today, I can't justify coming in at the price that they're asking. I need to wait. So that's the time when you would just say, okay, I'm interested in this property. It's a great location. It fits my buy box, but you're kind of living 3 years in the past, and we need you to come to right now, and then we can really have a conversation. So that's really what market research will tell you. Like what areas are turning to the downside, what areas are increasing, where's appreciation happening, where can you find deals, and where can you pick them up where you're making a lot of money at the buy, assuming that you run it right after the purchase.
Yeah, and I think you do a phenomenal job of the market research aspect of things, and obviously running the numbers, right? I think that's probably the biggest question on people's minds is, okay, I have some semblance of what I'm supposed to be doing here. I understand that I have to evaluate this property. The first step, Alex, whenever you're doing the math to evaluate whether a property is worth your time or not, obviously you're taking the net operating income, or the NOI, and what are you doing with it? Like, how are you evaluating these properties to see if they're worth your time, and kind of going further into the due diligence process?
Yeah, for sure. So, like you said, the NOI is really what drives a lot of your valuation, and how you come to your own NOI on what you truly think it should be and what's accurate is really up to your risk tolerance. So I kind of have a simple formula that I run through, just to see, is there potential, is this at a good price based off of the market, and then is there enough. The main term in all of commercial real estate is value add. People slap it on anything, but is there enough value add? If I come in and acquire this asset, is there enough room for me to increase this by $100,000 of NOI in the first year, in the first year and a half? And that's all determined based off of the financials that are provided to you. So, like we talked about earlier, the top line revenue and the expenses. Usually, the safe bet is if it's at a 50% or higher expense compared to the revenue, then you have an opportunity for value add somewhere. That's usually a mismanaged property, or there was just a ridiculous amount of capital expense that went into getting the property's face value up or renovating rooms. So if I see a property where over half of the revenue is being taken out from the total operating expenses, then I know that somewhere in those line items I can add value there. I can bill back tenants. I can add in laundry charges. I can add in pet fees. I can add in something where there is more revenue coming in and there are less expenses going out. So that's kind of, if I see that, that's an automatic, I'm looking at this a little bit further. And yeah, you're just trying to increase that bottom line. And the more that you can do that, the better off you'll be.
Absolutely. So we'll kind of wrap things up here and give you one last question, because I know you are a very busy man, Mr. Raschke. And so, what advice would you give to somebody who's looking to get started in multifamily / commercial and get into like underwriting the properties? And what would you say to like your square one, day one self? You know, like if you had to go back in time and talk to yourself.
You have to network. You have to network. You have to be able to bounce ideas off of one another, so that you can get different vantage points, or just to learn from somebody else. Like I've had the privilege of having some great mentors who will give you clear cut, this is not a deal, and you should just move on to the next one. And you're sitting there saying, it's a deal though. I brought you everything we need to work through it. Like, this is a deal. And as you talk more and more with others who are also operating in the space, you'll start to pick up on the little things that you, or the big things first that you need to look for to kind of validate a deal as overall. And then you can start working on the little finite details. You don't want to just be eating the whole thing all at once. You know, you gotta go through kind of the stepping stones of building up that knowledge base. So I would say networking, number one, and with networking will be probably a lot of beginner folks who want to also get into that space. Because as we mentioned earlier, multifamily as a whole, it's kind of well known that if you hit one good deal, it sets you up for the rest of your life. Like you can be golden after one multifamily or one commercial deal. So it's very lucrative and very appealing in that sense. So a lot of times you'll get people, like you'll start talking with people and they'll say, yeah, I really want to break into this space. I have X, Y, and Z person who are sending me all sorts of leads and deals. And I would go into each one of those saying, this is not a deal, but I'm going to look at it. And if you go into it saying it's not a deal and it turns out to be a deal, that's phenomenal. But if you go into it saying each one of these is a deal and you start burning up so much of your time looking at something that should have been discarded within 5 minutes, then you're just wasting your time at that point. So just go through the reps, keep asking questions. You know, how do I kind of factor in my debt? How much will that be taking out of my bottom line? If I bring in partners, how much am I going to have to pay them? Where can I add value to this property? What sort of, am I going to be getting paid at all for the first year? Or is all of that going to be funneled back into CapEx? Do I not want to raise capital for all of my CapEx? All of these things you can start to learn, but you have to just go through those initial steps first. And you only do that by working with other people, or if you just have a phenomenal book that I don't know about, then you can learn it that way too. But being able to bounce ideas off of one another is how I learned pretty much everything, and I will stick to that all the way through.
I love it. Alex, you've given so much value. I just want to say thank you for coming on the podcast. Thank you for giving everybody an insight on, a day in the life of Alex and the greatness that ensues. Obviously, we'd love to do another podcast with you. You're welcome back anytime. But for now, folks, that's all we have for you. I'm Paul Rodriguez. That's Mike Oakes. And this is Alex Raschke. Thank you guys for being here. Thanks for watching to the end. We'll see you next week.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me on.